I've been sitting on this for years, and I don't really know why I'm writing it now. Maybe it's because I heard a phrase again recently. Buis middelost, ein Schritt, der das Urteil verandert. Evidence exchange, a step that changed the verdict. That one step, yeah, it changed everything for me too. My name's William. I'm not going to pretend I'm innocent or misunderstood. I made choices. Bad ones? The kind you don't undo, only outlive, if you're lucky. This wasn't my first crime. Not even close. But it was the one that stuck. The one that followed me into quiet rooms and long nights, the one that still shows up when I close my eyes. At the time, I didn't think it was a big deal. That's the scary part. It never starts big. It starts small, rational, almost harmless in your own head. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. I was wrong. So here's the thing. I didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin someone's life. That would be easier to explain, honestly. This was slower. Messier. Built on 100 tiny justifications. Back then, I was working a forgettable job in a logistics office. Nothing glamorous, spreadsheets, shipping records, inventory audits. The kind of place where mistakes slip through because nobody's really paying attention. And I noticed that pretty quickly. At first, it was just curiosity. I'd stay late, poke around files I didn't need to access, see how everything fit together. There's a strange comfort in systems, predictable, logical. And once you understand them, you start seeing where they break. The idea didn't hit me all at once. It crept in. A misplaced entry here. A duplicated record there. Nothing major. Just adjustments. I told myself I was testing the system. Seeing how secure it really was. No harm, no foul, right? But the truth is, that's where it began, not with the crime itself, but with the realization that I could do it, and probably get away with it. I remember the exact moment it stopped being curiosity, and turned into something else. It was late, past 9 p.m., and I was alone in the office again. The cleaning staff had already passed through, lights half dimmed, that quiet hum of machines filling the space. I had 2 screens open, one with the inventory logs, the other with shipment confirmations. That's when I noticed it. A discrepancy. Small, but consistent. Certain items, high-value electronics, were being logged twice in one system but only shipped once in another. Not often enough to raise alarms, but enough to create a shadow, an extra unit that technically existed on paper. Most people would flag it. I didn't. Instead, I stared at it longer than I should have. Ran scenarios in my head. If one item could disappear into that gap, would anyone even notice? That was the first real thought. Not, this is wrong. But, this is possible. And once your brain crosses that line, once you start thinking in terms of opportunity instead of rules, it's hard to go back. I didn't act on it right away. I wish I could say that hesitation meant I had a conscience fighting back, but honestly, it was more about fear than morality. Fear of getting caught, of messing up something I didn't fully understand yet. So I did what I always do when I'm unsure, I observed. For the next couple of weeks, I paid closer attention to everything. Who checked the logs? When audits happened? Which managers actually cared and which ones just signed off without looking? Patterns started forming, and with them, confidence. That gap in the system? It wasn't a fluke. It was baked into how things were handled between departments. Too many steps, too many people assuming someone else had verified things. I started telling myself a story. If the system is broken, it's not really theft, it's just exploiting inefficiency. If no one notices, then maybe it doesn't matter. If the company can absorb the loss, then who am I really hurting? It sounds stupid now. But back then, it made perfect sense. Once I stopped arguing with myself, everything got clearer. That's the dangerous part, when the doubt fades, and your mind shifts into problem-solving mode instead of moral hesitation. I didn't want to rush it. If I was going to do this, it had to look like nothing ever happened. I started mapping out the process step by step. First, identify the exact items most likely to slip through unnoticed, small, expensive, frequently shipped. Then, track when they were logged, who handled them, and when the system updated. Timing was everything. I even kept notes. Not on paper, I wasn't that careless, but in my head, rehearsing it over and over until it felt routine. The idea was simple: create a duplicate record that would never fully reconcile, then remove the physical item before anyone thought to question it. On paper, everything would look slightly off, but not wrong enough to trigger alarms. Still, there was one thing I couldn't control: people. And people, I would learn, are where plans start to crack. I didn't jump straight into it. No way. I needed to know how far I could go before anyone even twitched. So I started small, smaller than I originally planned. Not high-value electronics, not yet. Just something minor, something that wouldn't trigger a cascade of questions if it went missing. I picked an item that already had a slight discrepancy in the system. That way, if anything came up, it could be blamed on the same usual error. The night I did it, my hands were steadier than I expected. That surprised me. I thought I'd be shaking, second-guessing everything, but instead I felt focused. Like I was following a script I'd already memorized. Log adjusted. Timestamp aligned. Physical item moved. That was it. No alarms. No sudden calls. No one bursting through the door asking questions. The next day, I watched closely. Conversations, emails, body language, anything. Nothing. That silence? It didn't calm me down. It did the opposite. That first time should have scared me straight. That's what I tell myself now anyway. But back then, the silence felt like confirmation. Not relief, something worse. Permission. A couple of days passed, then a week. No emails about missing stock. No meetings. No tightened procedures. The system just absorbed it. Like it always had. I remember sitting at my desk, staring at the same logs that used to intimidate me, and realizing I wasn't nervous anymore. I was calculating. If one item disappeared without a trace, what about two? What about something more valuable? That's when I crossed another line, the one where it stops being an experiment and becomes a pattern. I chose a better target this time. Smaller than a laptop, but worth enough to matter. I timed it carefully, right before a shift change when accountability blurred. And again, I made the adjustment. Again, nothing happened. That's when the thrill kicked in. Not excitement exactly, more like control. Like I had figured out something no one else had. And that feeling, it hooks you fast. After the second time, it stopped feeling like a risk and started feeling like a process. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. You stop asking, "Should I?" and start asking, "When next?" I built a rhythm around it. Never too often, never too predictable. I spaced things out, changed item types, varied the timing. I treated it like a system within the system, something that had to stay invisible to survive. And honestly, it worked. Weeks turned into months. Nothing flagged. No internal reviews pointing in my direction. If there were discrepancies, they got buried under the usual noise of errors and miscounts. But here's the part one didn't expect: it stopped being about the items. It became about proving I could do it. Every successful adjustment, every unnoticed removal, it fed something in me. Not greed, not exactly. More like a quiet arrogance. A belief that I understood the machine better than anyone else inside it. And that's when I made the mistake that really mattered. I stopped being careful, and started being confident. Confidence is dangerous because it doesn't feel like a mistake when it's happening. It feels like clarity, like you've finally figured everything out. That's exactly where I was when I chose the item that would eventually unravel everything. It was bigger. Not physically, but in value. The kind of thing that didn't move as frequently, which should have been my first warning. Less movement means more attention, more tracking, more chances for someone to notice something off. I knew that. And I did it anyway. I told myself I'd compensate for the risk by being extra precise. Triple-check the logs. Align timestamps perfectly. Make it cleaner than anything I'd done before. But the truth is, I wasn't compensating, I was overreaching. That night felt different. Not in an obvious way, just heavier. Like the air in the room had changed. I remember pausing longer than usual before making the adjustment, my hand hovering over the keyboard. For a second, I almost stopped. Almost. That hesitation? That was the last clear warning I got. I ignored it. Confidence is dangerous because it doesn't feel like a mistake when it's happening. It feels like clarity, like you've finally figured everything out. That's exactly where I was when I chose the item that would eventually unravel everything. It was bigger. Not physically, but in value. The kind of thing that didn't move as frequently, which should have been my first warning. Less movement means more attention, more tracking, more chances for someone to notice something off. I knew that. And I did it anyway. I told myself I'd compensate for the risk by being extra precise. Triple-check the logs. Align timestamps perfectly. Make it cleaner than anything I'd done before. But the truth is, I wasn't compensating, I was overreaching. That night felt different. Not in an obvious way, just heavier. Like the air in the room had changed. I remember pausing longer than usual before making the adjustment, my hand hovering over the keyboard. For a second, I almost stopped. Almost. That hesitation? That was the last clear warning I got. I ignored it. Confidence is dangerous because it doesn't feel like a mistake when it's happening. It feels like clarity, like you've finally figured everything out. That's exactly where I was when I chose the item that would eventually unravel everything. It was bigger. Not physically, but in value. The kind of thing that didn't move as frequently, which should have been my first warning. Less movement means more attention, more tracking, more chances for someone to notice something off. I knew that. And I did it anyway. I told myself I'd compensate for the risk by being extra precise. Triple-check the logs. Align timestamps perfectly. Make it cleaner than anything I'd done before. But the truth is, I wasn't compensating, I was overreaching. That night felt different. Not in an obvious way, just heavier. Like the air in the room had changed. I remember pausing longer than usual before making the adjustment, my hand hovering over the keyboard. For a second, I almost stopped. Almost. That hesitation? That was the last clear warning I got. I ignored it. I went through the motions like I always did. Log in, check timestamps, cross-reference entries. On the surface, nothing had changed. Same screens, same quiet office, same hum of fluorescent lights. But I wasn't as alone as I thought. Halfway through adjusting the records, I heard footsteps. Not loud, not sudden, just enough to break my focus. My first instinct was irritation, not fear. That's how deep I was in it. I minimized the window out of habit and turned slightly, expecting cleaning staff. It wasn't. It was Martin from the night shift. He wasn't supposed to be in that section. He just stood there for a second, looking at me, then at the screen, like he was trying to piece together what he'd walked into. "Working late?" he asked. Simple question. Normal tone. But there was a pause after it. A beat too long. I shrugged it off, gave some excuse about catching up on discrepancies. He nodded, but not convincingly. That look he gave me before leaving? That was the moment everything stopped being under my control. I told myself I was overthinking it. That Martin didn't see anything, didn't understand what he was looking at. People mind their own business, especially on night shifts. That's the rule, right? Except, he didn't. The next day, nothing happened. No confrontation, no questions. But the day after that, things started to feel off. Small things at first. A supervisor double-checking logs that normally got waved through, a casual mention of recent inconsistencies, during a team briefing. It wasn't direct, but it was enough. Then Martin spoke to me again. Nothing accusatory. Just curious. Asked how I managed to keep everything so organized. Said he noticed I stayed late a lot. There was something behind his words, like he was fishing without knowing exactly what for. I played it cool. Smiled, brushed it off, gave him nothing. But inside, something had shifted. For the first time in months, I felt it again, that tightness in my chest, that awareness that maybe I wasn't as invisible as I thought. And once that feeling comes back, it doesn't leave quietly. A week later, everything escalated, quietly, almost politely, which somehow made it worse. We were called into a meeting. Not the whole team, just a few of us who had access to the inventory systems. Management kept the tone neutral, almost reassuring. Routine review, they said. Standard procedure. Then they mentioned it, Buis Middelost. Evidence exchange. At first, I didn't fully process what that meant. But as they explained, it clicked. 2 departments had started cross-verifying records more strictly. Logs that used to exist in parallel were now being directly compared, line by line. The exact gap I had been using? It was closing. I sat there, nodding along like everyone else, but my mind was racing. Not panic, not yet, but a sharp, cold awareness. Every adjustment I had made, every invisible discrepancy, it was all still there, just waiting to be aligned. And if someone followed the trail far enough, they wouldn't find a system error. They'd find a pattern. And patterns always point to someone. Once I understood what was happening, my first instinct wasn't to stop. It should have been. That would have been the smart move: step back, let things settle, hope the past stayed buried. Instead, I tried to fix it. I went back into the system, retracing everything I'd done over the past months. Adjustments, duplicates, timing gaps, all of it. I convinced myself that if I could just smooth out the inconsistencies, make the records align cleanly, I could erase the trail before anyone fully connected it. But here's the problem. The more you touch something, the more you risk leaving fingerprints. What used to be small, isolated discrepancies started turning into clusters. Fixing one entry created tension somewhere else. Numbers that once kind of worked together suddenly needed deeper corrections. And that's when the paranoia kicked in. Every login felt risky. Every second at the terminal felt visible. I started imagining eyes on me, reports generating in real time, someone somewhere noticing the changes as they happened. I wasn't in control anymore. I was reacting. It didn't end with some dramatic confrontation or security dragging me out of the office. That's what I expected, honestly, something loud, undeniable. Instead, it was quiet. I was called into a room with 2 managers and someone from compliance I'd never seen before. No accusations at first. Just questions. Calm, methodical, almost detached. They showed me records. Not all at once, piece by piece. A discrepancy here, another there. Then a timeline. Then access logs. And then the pattern. Seeing it laid out like that, it hit differently. What had felt random and invisible when I was doing it now looked structured, intentional. Obvious. I tried to explain. System flaws, overlapping responsibilities, honest mistakes. I heard myself talking, but it sounded weak, even to me. Then they mentioned the cross-verification, the Buis Middelost. That final alignment of data between departments. That was the step that broke everything open. There wasn't a single piece of evidence that got me. It was how all the pieces suddenly fit together. I won't go into every detail of what followed: investigations, paperwork, consequences. Let's just say I didn't walk away untouched. Whether you call it getting caught or being exposed, the result was the same: everything I thought I had under control collapsed. What stayed with me isn't even the punishment. It's how ordinary it all felt in the beginning. That's the part one keep coming back to. There was no big turning point, no dramatic decision where I knowingly crossed into something irreversible. It was gradual, a series of small choices that felt justified at the time, almost harmless. Until they weren't. I think about that phrase a lot now, Buis middelost. Not just as a technical step, but as a reminder that truth has a way of catching up when separate pieces finally connect. If you're reading this and thinking about testing a system, bending rules, seeing what you can get away with, don't. Not because you'll definitely get caught, but because you won't notice when it stops being a test and becomes who you are.